A couple of days ago, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith released mandate letters that she had sent to herself as Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs and three of her cabinet ministers. I'm going to talk to Duane Bratt, Professor of Political Science at Mount Royal University, about those letters. So welcome to the interview, Duane.
Hey,
Okay,
Mark, I'm happy to be here.
give me your overview take of these letters. What's Smith up to?
There's a lot in these letters. The first is claiming a retrenchment away from federal jurisdiction or asserting provincial jurisdiction in a wide variety of fields, whether that is involving international agreements that the federal government signs, whether that is gun laws, whether that is those evil 9 bills that she keeps talking about. So one of the themes right across the board is a greater assertion of Alberta sovereignty on immigration, on policing, a whole variety of things. Now, in some respects, they already have the powers to do so. So I don't know why that's in a mandate letter, but there you go.
What are the politics of this? We know
I think a
that.
second, yeah.
Go ahead. I mean, what are the politics of this?
Well, obviously, the politics are around the debate around separatism in this province and the ongoing Alberta Next panel about asserting greater sovereignty in a united Canada. So clearly, fighting Ottawa is a major point, even though publicly she appears to be quite supportive of some of the moves that Markcarney has been making. These letters don't indicate that.
Help me understand something. Carney has moved further towards her demands around oil and gas than any prime minister. Well, certainly Justin Trudeau when he was prime minister. And she seems to be
Yeah.
making progress based on his comments and Energy Minister Tim Hodgson's comments. Isn't this an odd negotiating strategy?
It is, unless you believe, as Smith may very well, that holding Carney's feet to the fire is why he's moving so in this direction. So she's almost playing good cop and bad cop by herself. So good cop, she's in front of the press, speaking very optimistically about Markcarney, thanking him for removing the carbon tax, for delaying the EV mandate, for musing about the removal of the emissions cap, to oil pipeline perhaps being in the second phase of the major projects list. But then when it comes to the mandate letters, it's a much more aggressive tone, and it goes well beyond oil and gas. So there is oil and gas there, but there's also stuff about Alberta asserting its goals around the CUSMA negotiation table, about border security. So there's a lot of U.S. elements in here. There's gun issues in here, which has always been a fight. They're even throwing MAID in here. So as I said, does she believe that it's this threat that's moving Carney, or is she pushing against an open door? I think she believes it's these threats, and she's continuing to go through that.
Now, Duane, over the decades, we've seen Alberta and other provinces have fights with the federal government over jurisdiction. Some of them wind up at the Supreme Court, and some of them are resolved politically. But I don't ever remember in my years seeing a government assert a constitutional authority in this way. Is this unique?
It's systematic right across the mandate letters. And so it is consistent with what Smith has been doing since she ran for the UCP leadership in the summer of 2022. So she keeps talking about, I always believe in a sovereign Alberta and a united Canada. Well, the united Canada was an add-on. Originally, it was just a sovereign Alberta. And so that's where she's pursuing. So I wonder if she's going to expand or try to expand the notion of what Alberta jurisdiction is and shrink the notion of federal jurisdiction. So this isn't just the traditional fights This is an expansion of fights into other areas as well, like border security.
Is it possible here that for a lot of these principles, and there are a lot of areas that she touches on in the mandate letters, she really doesn't think that she's going to win, or it really doesn't matter. It's the fight that matters. And as, in particular, you mentioned the separatist forces, and Thomas Lukaszuk and the Forever Canadian campaign is doing well. Is this a response in part to that, perhaps?
I think you have to look at that in its entirety, that you do have this referendum possibly looming around separatism. You do have this Alberta Next that has identified 6 pillars of greater Alberta autonomy. And what I also find striking are the attacks on judges. And you can see this with some weird phrasing, but was clarified by the Premier, where there's a couple of letters where she talks about she's directing the ministry to use all legal and constitutional means. Well, what does and constitutional means mean? I think it means using the notwithstanding clause, section 33, because there was a leaked memo that came out from the Department of Justice saying that they were planning on using that for the 3 anti-transgender bills. And that phrase and constitutional is in the sport minister bill and or the mandate letter and in the education mandate letter. So that tells me that she's spoiling the fight, not just with the federal government, but with the courts. But if you listen to her talking about the courts, she'll talk about how the federal government appoints the courts. So the courts are less legitimate because they're appointed by, Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney. She hasn't gone as far as, some of the PQ leaders where they talk about the liberal appointed judges. She just talks about federal appointed judges. So this isn't just a fight with the federal government. This is with the federal judiciary as well.
Now, you made a point that many of the commentators on these mandate letters have focused on the one she sent to herself as Intergovernmental Affairs Minister. So, launching new international offices, enhancing trade investment strategies. But in fact, it's the other 3 that are really far more interesting than maybe the extension of the work that she's going to be doing.
Absolutely. There's some interesting things about writing a letter to yourself and what's in there. And people have been focused on, protecting Alberta's jurisdiction from international agreements. Well, that has always been a provincial power, not just in Alberta, but all provinces, going back to the labor conventions case of the 1830s that said the federal government can sign whatever agreement it wants internationally, but it can't implement them into areas of provincial jurisdiction, which makes total sense. If you can't pass laws and regulate provincial jurisdiction from Ottawa, why would you be able to do that through a back channel of an international agreement? But a lot of commentaries don't realize that that's already a power, and they think she's asserting some greater degree of power in there. So I think that is interesting. But the other is, I keep mentioning this Alberta Next panel, which is consulting Albertans about, should we have a provincial police force? Should we have a pension plan? Should we have greater control of immigration, etc.? Well, then you look at the mandate letters, and she's directing the public safety minister to continue to provide options for rural municipalities to choose an Alberta police option. That sounds to me like they're going ahead with something that they're already consulting Albertans on. And they're talking to the trade, jobs, immigration minister about asserting greater Alberta control over immigration, which is also one of the things that they're consulting Albertans about. So are you consulting through Alberta Next, or are you trying to sway? I think this is more evidence that they're swaying because they're going about doing it anyway.
Let's talk about the expanded alternative policing, the sheriffs being a provincial police force. This comes on the heels of Donald Trump sending military troops down to Portland, ostensibly because there's some kind of an insurrection going on down there. And this idea of using police force, directing police forces in a way that we haven't seen before, this isn't the same, but it has kind of an echo to it. Would you agree or disagree?
I do. I think it's a bit more of an exaggeration. We don't have the equivalent of a National Guard, right? So what she's talking about is Grand Prairie has moved from the RCMP to a Grand Prairie police force. She would like a provincial police force. She's expanding the sheriffs to do that. I think the issue is always about money. You talk to rural municipalities, to them, it doesn't matter what the color of the uniform is, it's how much it's going to cost. And right now, RCMP is subsidized. But the expanding the sheriffs to the border, that is a bit more fascinating. And she argues that in her original mandate letter to the public safety minister, that they did include border security with the United States in there. But that was about guns and drugs coming from the US into Canada. Subsequent to Donald Trump's complaint about fentanyl, Smith is trying to adopt the same position as Donald Trump, that the real threat is coming from Canada to the US, and therefore she's diverting drones and additional sheriffs to border security, which sounds to me moving into federal jurisdiction. And her argument is, well, the feds aren't doing a good enough job in that area, therefore we're obligated to move in. I don't think that argument would work well if the federal government said, for example, on healthcare, Alberta, you're doing a horrible job on healthcare. We have to intervene. So I find that interesting. And this is just part of this anti-Ottawa sentiment to get rid of the RCMP. I mean, you talk about a symbol of Canada. The RCMP is a symbol of Canada. And so removing that symbol is part of her goal. So I don't think this is about putting, a special militia that Smith controls into cities. Perhaps, and she started doing that in Edmonton and Calgary well before Donald Trump. So maybe Trump is following Smith.
Look ahead over the next, few months, maybe a year, Duane. How is this going to play out?
Well, let's see what the report comes. There's still a couple town halls with the Alberta Next panel. See what the final report comes out in, as well as Grey Cup. Carney has almost said there will be an oil pipeline approved as a major project by Grey Cup. If that deadline passes, then what does Smith do?
Duane, as always, thank you very much for this.
Okay, you're welcome.